Many regard Silent Hill 3 as the true sequel to the first game, and even though the second entry was just as impressive, it was very much its own thing. This time around, it was a return to the various aspects that made the series so popular, mainly the world of the occult and how it closely tied into the story. You take up the role of Heather, a rather interesting character when it comes to the series lore, and for those who haven't played it, I won't spoil too much, but you once again find yourself called back to the town of Silent Hill, where Heather must overcome her fears and ultimately bring an end to a mysterious cult. Now, the survival horror genre as a whole is generally geared towards mainstream fears, and as such it's rather unimaginative in regards to its scenarios, enemies and atmosphere. The fear element is traditionally created by using cheap scares, such as zombies hiding behind doors or spiders waiting to jump out at you, but Silent Hill has always been different and instead focuses on a more psychological type of horror, which is far more effective. This is where Silent Hill 3 excels, which offers far more than simply walking and shooting, as running away is just as important, as there's simply not enough ammo to kill everything you come across. So exploring is key, and the puzzles are genuinely challenging and actually change depending on which difficulty setting you choose, and with multiple endings available as well. The amount of replay value it brings to the table is staggering. Of course, one area where Silent Hill 3 truly comes into its own though are the visuals, which are easily some of the most impressive you'll find on the system. The lighting and shadow work come together to create an almost oppressive atmosphere for the player to tackle, and when you couple this with the disturbing enemies, it's a game that will stay with you long after the credits have rolled. Fans of horror will no doubt be familiar with The Thing, a movie that released back in '82 from John Carpenter. It takes place in the Antarctic and sees a group of scientists on an expedition who soon find themselves in a living nightmare after coming into contact with an alien lifeform that can seemingly morph into the form of anything it's killed. The game takes place after the end of the film, when a search and rescue team is sent in to see what the hell happened, with the player taking control as the leader of the squad. For the most part, this is your standard survival horror, but what makes it different is the concept of managing your team, and as you move through the game you'll take on different people that represent different classes. One is a medic, which will always be around to heal you, the next is a soldier who will cover your back and keep you safe, and the final member of the team is the engineer that can work the different systems throughout the base. You must learn how to use your team effectively in order to keep them together and keep everyone on good terms. This is where the trust system comes into play, with each action you take increasing or decreasing trust respectively. As the fear progresses and the situation starts to go downhill for one or all of your team, they'll begin to start acting strangely and the trust will all but disappear. When that happens, all hell will break loose and you may end up in a firefight with your own people. This feature alone is what makes The Thing so compelling, as it's not only the aliens around you that pose a threat, but each and every person you meet along the way as well. This adds a severe sense of tension as you make your way through the game, just like the movie itself. So if you love the film and are fond of tactical third-person shooters, then The Thing is definitely worth giving a go. Cold Fear often gets a bad rap for being nothing more than a clone of Resident Evil 4, and while there is some truth to that statement, completely writing it off would be a huge mistake. Let's get the obvious out of the way. It does borrow heavily from RE4, mainly in the way it controls and plays, but what helps set it apart is the setting the adventure takes place in, and it actually plays into the gameplay itself. Set on a ship that's gone dark, you play the part of a coast guard who's sent to investigate what happened, and upon your arrival, it's not long until the reason becomes apparent. The once human crew are now flesh-eating monstrosities, and it's up to you to unravel the mystery and eventually find your way to safety. As I mentioned earlier, the environment plays as much a role as the enemies do, due to a huge storm that sees the ship constantly swaying and altering your aim, or waves that crash over the side of the freighter as you try to deal with the endless hordes of monsters that come your way. This feature really adds to the intensity of each encounter, but luckily you've got plenty of options at your fingertips, with the selection of weapons being the most prominent. From machine guns to flamethrowers and grenade launchers, you're more than equipped to deal with them. But the same can't be said for the other monsters that lurk in the dark, which pose a far more menacing threat than the common zombies. In these situations, you'll have to stay on your toes, with your movement being just as important as your ability to fight back. With its imposing atmosphere, edge of your seat gameplay and terrifying soundtrack, Cold Fear is without a doubt one of the finest examples of a survival horror on the PlayStation 2. The Suffering is at its core nothing more than a survival horror game like the ones we've played so many times before, but what made it different was the ability to play in both first and third person, and the unique abilities of the character you play as. It's all set in a prison, with Torque the protagonist being infamous amongst the inmates for his often violent outbursts and the crime that got him locked up in the first place. Shortly after entering his cell, all hell breaks loose on the island, with fiery sinkholes appearing in the ground and terrible creatures killing the other prisoners and guards. It soon becomes apparent that these monsters are after Torque specifically, prompting him to find a weapon and begin to hold his own against them. You gain a huge range of weapons to get the job done, ranging from a shiv and fire axe to a shotgun, dual pistols and grenades, and you'll need them too, as the creatures are far different from your standard zombies and put up one hell of a fight as a result. When you kill these monstrosities, your insanity meter rises, and when this meter is full, you can hit triangle to transform into a beast, where you have 3 separate attacks that make short work of the other monsters. As well as all the carnage in the game, there are a few puzzles that need tackling in order to progress further as well. These aren't really anything special or challenging. In fact, the difficulty will likely be laughable to survival horror fans, but they do provide a welcome break in the pacing of the game. Overall, it isn't really a scary experience, but rather a disturbing trip into the mind of a criminal, and it's through this mechanism that much of the horror is delivered to the player that'll likely leave a lasting impression. Apart from being one of the most expensive and rarest games on the PlayStation 2, Q1 is by far also one of the most disturbing that you'll find on the system. The story is very twisted and bizarre and revolves around 2 women, one a disciple of a powerful exorcist and the other his daughter, who enter a mansion that's been overrun by demons. Although it sounds quite cliche on the surface, it quickly becomes an engaging, original and totally engrossing adventure that fans of Japanese horror will adore. Now, in terms of gameplay, everything is presented from a fixed perspective that keeps the idea in the back of the player's mind that you never quite know what is waiting for you around each corner. This is only made worse by the several monsters that stop at nothing to foil your efforts of clearing the huge structure of demons, but thankfully you've got a couple of ways to stand your ground. The most common of these is using your dagger, but the game does open up and allows you to fight back using several types of magic that are represented by cards. These look like paper talismans and allow you to produce a variety of effects, from throwing a flaming arrow to summoning a living puppet to fight along your side. They're pretty rare though, and it's best to save them for the harder enemies you'll eventually come across when your knife just won't do the job on its own. Unfortunately, the game is relatively short and can easily be beat quite quickly, but there are several reasons to jump back in once you've made it through to the end for the first time. It offers a sort of new game plus mode that allows you to carry over all of your magic for a new run, as well as a few minigames that serve to mix up the minute-to-minute gameplay. Although it's not the best horror game on the PS2 by any means, if you're fond of Japanese-styled horror, Q1 will not disappoint. After the somewhat disappointing sequel to the first game, Fatal Frame 3 felt like a real return to form for the series, and follows the story of a photographer known as Ray. As she's taking photographs of a supposedly haunted manor, her deceased fiancé appears in one of her photos, prompting her to explore even deeper and get to the bottom of what is actually going on inside its walls. Fans of the series will feel right at home, as when it comes to gameplay not much has changed, with it all still revolving around the use of the camera and trying to exorcise the ghosts you come across. When one of them attacks, a circle ring appears around them if the camera is on them, and symbols pop up around that. The more you get, the stronger the shot. If the circle turns red, it becomes a fatal frame shot and does major damage. By doing this, you gain points for quickly taking care of a ghost, and these can be used for one of 2 different things, mainly to upgrade your camera, as well as unlock several of the game's hidden secrets, like new costumes that make a second playthrough all the more enjoyable. Now, while the gameplay won't be for everyone, Fatal Frame 3 definitely excels in the graphics department. I was quite stunned with the amount of detail put into each character in the cutscenes and even in-game, as they look incredibly realistic for its time. The environments also have a nice drab and musty look, which fits very well with the horror theme of the game. With its great lighting effects, dark environments and terrifying ghosts, Fatal Frame 3 is a great game, and while not as visceral and hectic as say Resident Evil 4, it still manages to give you a number of great scares. Top that off with a very sad and emotional story, and what you have is one of the best horror games you'll find on the PS2. Resident Evil 4 is largely considered as one of the most influential games of all time. It was a huge departure from the usual formula that the series was known for, and instead introduced an over-the-shoulder view that brought the player right into the action, as opposed to the fixed cameras of old. The main focus of the game is to locate the president's daughter as you fill the role of Leon Kennedy, who's sent to Europe in order to do so. In true Resident Evil fashion, it's not long before everything goes south, and you're greeted with a much more nimble enemy as opposed to the shuffling zombies of the series past. Thanks to the different perspective, however, you're more than capable to take them on, as in previous games you were severely limited when it came to aiming, but here there's a lot more freedom in your approach, especially the gunplay. Enemies actually react to your shots, opening up many different strategies such as aiming for the legs and finishing them off with a melee attack, which really helps conserve your ammo, and you'll be needing it as the last Plagas are nigh on relentless in their approach. This is where the fear comes into the game, and instead of relying on the slow, almost methodical horror of the originals, it's the intensity which provides the scares, as often you'll find yourself surrounded with nothing to do but run the other way. They'll rush in at Leon with axes, knives and pitchforks and attempt to take you out in the most vicious ways possible, but to protect yourself you can set up barricades, use obstacles and utilize a number of firearms ranging from simple handguns to more powerful options like the sniper rifle, which pack an incredible punch. Resident Evil 4 transformed survival horror and action gaming on nearly every level, bringing a streamlined control system, incredible atmosphere and groundbreaking combat that makes it one of the best games of all time. On the surface, Siren seems like yet another run-of-the-mill action horror, but upon playing it, you'll soon see that it's a unique experience in its own right that sets out to do things differently than what came before it. It all takes place in a secluded Japanese village, where a mysterious ceremony in the woods is accidentally cut short by Suda, a young man who takes the spot of the main character and soon finds himself wrapped up in the petrifying town. You eventually come to play as several other characters who are also trapped in the area and have been cut off from the rest of the world by a supernatural river of blood, where all of the village's inhabitants have turned into the walking dead. They will attack, chase and even shoot you upon sight, so you must learn to efficiently and quietly sneak past them, whilst trying to fulfill one of the many objectives each mission brings. To be fair, there's not much variety in what they ask you to do, with most basically seeing you having to make it from point A to point B alive, or to do so whilst guiding along with a companion. What makes Siren quite unique, however, is the inclusion of a mechanic known as sightjacking. It allows you to understand what a human or monster in the area sees and hears, letting you determine its location, as well as gain knowledge of their activities and the position of obtainable items that can help you out. With the game promoting that you avoid enemies rather than staying and fighting, this feature soon becomes your most valuable asset as you carefully plan your way forward. Not knowing what is out there and what could be out there is a feeling that Siren absolutely nails, and because of it, the level of unease you'll experience while playing is off the charts. There really isn't anything else like Siren, and in spite of its unusual control scheme, the immersive world of scares it creates is something you won't easily forget. Clock Tower 3 may be the third game, but it was Capcom's first time having a go at the series, and it represented a departure from both the Clockwork formula and the survival horror genre as a whole. It abandoned the point-and-click gameplay for a far more traditional action-adventure the company had become well known for, and sees the player taking up the role of a young girl known as Alyssa, as she returns home to find it lifeless and empty, where she's soon drawn into a terrifying ordeal that reveals far more about her family's past than she bargained for. Now, the game is divided into several chapters, each of which deal with a certain murder mystery to solve and a relentless stalker to take down. At the center of the experience is the panic meter, which helps add a lot of tension to the game, because if you're attacked or when you are hiding and the killer is near this hiding spot, it will raise. If your panic meter gets to its fullest, Alyssa will panic and everything on the screen will become blurry, making it much harder to find your way around, and also leaving you far more susceptible to attack. Luckily, scattered throughout the mansion are various water fountains that bring your amount of stress down, so keeping yourself stocked up is the key to successfully making it through each chapter. What really makes the game unnerving is that your stalker can appear at random and more than likely will catch you off guard when you least suspect it. This aspect alone really amps up the fear factor of the game, and on top of this you'll have to deal with several puzzles at the same time, which some may find frustrating, but it's yet another way that the game will keep you on your toes. Whilst it was a huge departure from what had come before it, Clock Tower 3 is still a solid survival horror that's just as terrifying today as it was all those years ago. Silent Hill 2 is easily one of my favourite survival horrors on the console. It managed to improve upon nearly every aspect of the first game and offered a much more intimate story that would leave a lasting impression upon anyone that played it. The story begins with James Sunderland receiving a letter from his deceased wife, imploring him to come to the town of Silent Hill and to meet her in their special place. Along the way, James will meet certain other people who have been drawn to the town, each by their own reasons, and it soon becomes clear that not everything is as it seems. Much like the original, it's still all about finding items and solving puzzles as you either evade, shoot or beat down hideous demons, and Silent Hill 2 carries this out masterfully. This is further hit home with 5 different endings you can unlock depending on how you've played the game, and this feature alone adds an incredible amount of replay value to the game, as well as several different difficulty settings for both the combat and puzzles that make it up. Now Silent Hill 2 is almost unstoppably gorgeous in the most foul, grotesque and unclean way possible. Every environment is infested with hideous detail, walls are slathered with cascades of blood, and you're traipsing through it all with just a torch and a bit of wood with a couple of nails on the end. The level of tension this creates is at times unbearable, and when you couple it with the various encounters you'll have throughout the town, it all comes together to create one of the most terrifying experiences you can play on the PlayStation 2. It engrosses you into the depths of its psychological horror, mainly with its storytelling, atmosphere, music and gameplay like no other game has or likely will. Well, that does it for today's video. Keep an eye out for part 2 as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to hit that bell to get notified about new videos. You can follow me on all of the socials which are linked below to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters: Rhino, Skilljim, Shuden, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Maximus, Scott, Alfred, Terry, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, Curse Salaryman, Fake and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links down below. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.